If you wonder what's needed to understand Master's game and is it a good material for a beginner, intermediate, or advanced level player, spend next 10 minutes watching this video. It's gonna either improve your coaching skills or help you as a chess player. We have Indian number 1 Arjun Eregaisi as white versus Hui Fan, best female chess player in the world, played couple of days ago in Astana, Kazakhstan. We had d4, knight f6, knight c3. Leading black pieces, most of those who move automatically in this position would play the same way as when white goes for the usual c4, allowing white to play e4, transposing into some sort of the French or Peer's defense, which would be a very bad news in case they don't normally play those openings. Hui Fan plays, of course, d5, which is the standard move to punish white for placing the knight in front of the c2 pawn. Bishop f4. What we have on the board is called rapport Jobava system. The idea is to coordinate the bishop and c3 knight to attack the c7 spot. In case you are showing this game to a beginner, it is important to notice that from the very beginning, white is putting effort in connecting pieces to work together, and that's exactly what players of such level need to see and learn. c5, we had e3 and e6. Black is flexible and has more space on the queen side thanks to the white's decision to put their knight on c3. However, that piece, as we know, has a mission, and it starts with knight to b5. Of course, black is going to defend against the knight c7 threat, but the price may be high. Their knight is going to be on the rim of the board, with the knight a6, of course. And white played c3. It is not only solidifying the center, but also potentially restricting the black knight. We had bishop e7 and a4. Not the only move, but definitely a useful one, because often black attacks the b5 knight by playing queen b6, after which bishop d7 may come as well. However, if a beginner would be watching this, they would start to think that developing pieces is not among their priorities, and that can harm the way they see the game. You need to explain why in this case it may be okay. Actually, in this case, the center is not open, therefore the game can't get sharp. So neglecting development for the time being may pass without getting punished. Black castled, and we got knight f3. Surprisingly, this is not the most played move in this position, because white can't save their f4 bishop after knight h5. That's why masters prefer playing h3 instead. Knight h5. Hui Fan knows that h3 is part of the white's plan, and not being played means that she should try to exploit it by going right away after the f4 bishop. However, it seems like Arjun allowed this on purpose. Bishop e5, f6, and bishop g3. His idea is to weaken black's king's position by provoking first f6, and later you'll see some more pawn moves. Now, the bishop can't be easily taken because after h takes g, the rook on h1 becomes extremely dangerous. Now, white king can safely move to f1 with great chances later for white to attack on the king side without any risk. Black plays bishop d7, developing her last minor piece, asking Arjun what is he going to do while waiting for knight takes g3. Of course, she is willing to trade her knight for the bishop on g3 only once Arjun castles short. And white plays bishop d3, developing but also threatening to sacrifice a piece and go for a checkmate in view of knight to g5. Knight takes g3 because knight on h5 was hanging, bishop takes h7, king h8, pawn takes g3 at this point, sacrificing on g5, but after bishop to g6, king g8 and queen h5, the checkmate is coming. Black plays g6, almost forced to prevent the white's knight g5 idea. White goes for queen e2, queen a5 by black. Now, a tempting move like c4 doesn't do much good for black because white gets a chance to play freely on the king side with close center. Bishop c2, bishop b5, pawn takes b5, knight c7, and there is bishop takes c7, queen takes c7, and g4, after which white develops quite good attack. Back to the game, white castles short. Black was threatening actually to win the knight on b5 by playing c4 at that point, because you cannot really play a takes b5 since a1 rook would be hanging. That's why white needed to castle connecting the rooks. But now knight takes g3, since the rook is no longer occupying the h file. H takes g3 and then c4. Hui Fan saw an opportunity to win a pawn after trading on b5, and this move is needed for the combination to work. However, this is also committing in the center, allowing white to push e4 soon after and basically start pressing through the center. Bishop c2, bishop takes b5, pawn takes b5, queen takes b5, and e4 obviously. Rook f7, defending the e7 bishop, which would be hanging after e takes d5. Black won a pawn, but their pieces are less active and their structure is vulnerable, especially the e6 pawn. Now, in case of queen takes b2, we would have pawn takes d5, and after knight c7, say rook a b1, queen takes pawn on c3, and rook takes b7, white would have better middle game. Back to the game, white plays b3. Thanks to the pin and undefended queen, this move is available. The goal is to take some space on the queen side and also try to remove from the center either c4 or d5 pawn. Now we had knight c7, pawn takes c4, queen takes c4, and bishop d3. Black could take on c3, but it will lose because of rook fc1, skewer. Therefore we got queen to c6, and then c4. White is one pawn behind, but more active pieces, greater center, and weaknesses of black on the king side, those are all reasons why white has a bit better position. We had a6, black wants to fight against white's pawn mass with the b5, and the idea is to create a passed pawn. We had rook fc1, threatening c takes d5, discovered attack. That's why we had queen d7, and g4. A stunning idea lies behind it. Pause the video and try to guess it. I'm moving on with the idea behind this move, which is to advance to g5 and deflect the black's f6 pawn from protecting the e5 square, creating an outpost for the white knight. Now white could have done e takes d5, e takes d5, c5, queen e6, queen c2, rook b8, and rook cb1, which guarantees a better game. Black played rook e8 to discourage trading on d5, since the white's queen is in line with the black's rook now. White plays rook a b1. Now c5 would have been also a good solution for white, because after d takes c, queen takes c4, knight to d5, and bishop c2, intending to move to a4 and win the exchange, or force the black rook away from e8, weakening the defense of the weak e6 pawn. I'd say maybe queen c8 at this point, and then rook e1, bishop f8, and bishop b3 with better game. We had b5, straightforward move with an idea to break the silence in the center, but also create a passed pawn and start marching down the board. C takes b5, a takes b5, and e5. Since we expected g5, this seems like a switch in white's planning. There was also an idea of rook takes b5 in order to recapture later with the bishop skewering the queen and the rook. But it won't work because of d takes e4, deflecting either queen or bishop from the same diagonal, and black is suddenly winning. We had rook to b8 in the game, pawn takes f6, bishop takes f6, and g5, gaining space on the king side. Bishop g7, knight to e5. Forcing the trade of minor pieces, meaning leaving black with the weakened dark squares. As predicted, bishop takes c5, queen takes c5, and rook b6. Well noticed resource, they want to put their queen on d6 and force white queen out of the central outpost. And now we had g3. The idea is to move the king to g2 and swing the rook to h1, potentially sacrificing the bishop on g6, deflecting the h7 pawn and delivering a checkmate on h8. Queen d6, queen e2. White needs their queen for the attack to work. b4, a typical way of playing when there is a passer on one side and their position is passive. The pawn's mission is to deflect white's pieces from the attack for black to consolidate. We had king g2, pawn to b3, rook h1, queen e7. Question is, does this even prevent white from continuing with the plan? Black is attacking the g5 pawn and wants to provoke f4, which would weaken white's king's position. However, white has a better solution, which I think Hui Fan completely overlooked, and that's queen e5. Not only that the g5 pawn is protected now, but there is a threat of immediately winning by sacrificing on g6, followed by mate on h8. That's why we had rook g7 here, and rook h to c1. Plan of doubling on the h file won't work with the black rook standing on g7 and queen on e7, both covering the 7th rank, making bishop take g6 idea almost impossible to work. Now, when this happens, there is a need to re-evaluate the situation on the board and check what our new target may be. By checking the activity of pieces, we can clearly spot that black's g7 rook is very passive. Now, that's a huge price black is paying, because the rook's natural placement is on the back rank somewhere, searching for an open file. This means black's back rank may be currently vulnerable. The move rook hc1 is emphasizing that, with the possibility of doubling on the c file or simply restricting the enemy's knight from moving away from the c file. We had b2 and rook c5. White's intention is to liberate their b1 rook and put it in the action. However, the simplest move, rook c2, would lead to a risk-free advantage for white. So we had rook f7 and rook h1, which is a real beauty when it comes to piece maneuvering. Rook g7, and now rook a5. The idea is to get to a7 and pin the knight. That's why we had queen d6, running away from the pin and again forcing white's queen out of the central outpost square. This time queen takes d6, rook takes d6 and rook b1. So white is grabbing an opportunity to trade everything and get into the endgame with even material, because the b2 pawn is falling now in 2 moves. The rook b6, rook a2, rook e7, f4. White was afraid of e6, e5, but this allows very unpleasant counterattack. Black played king g7 and the counterattack was in a possibility of playing rook to b4, attacking the weakness on d4. And now rook takes b2. White has a better endgame because of better pawn formation, especially thanks to the g5 pawn, which is completely preventing black's king from getting better. However, white pawn on d4 is also a weakness, not to forget about. And we had h6. Now the h pawn felt like possibly one of the main black's weaknesses, along with the e6 pawn. However, Kifan could have waited with it and instead maneuvered the knight to a better spot. We had g takes h and king takes h6. This way black gets an even worse weakness than before. The g6 is worse than pawn on h7 because white has an easy access to the g6 one. However, black was thinking that if they manage to push g5, their problems are solved. White plays king f3 to prevent g5. The reason is rook to h2 check and the g-pawn falls. Black plays king g7 and we had rook to b7, creating quite unpleasant pin along the 7th rank. Black solves that with the rook f7. White plays king g4, preventing black from playing knight e8, for example, because of rook takes f7, king takes f7, and then king g5, after which the g6 pawn is going to be captured. Black plays king f6 and white goes for rook b8, trying to get the rook to the g file and attack the pawn from behind. Black plays rook g7. White goes for rook h8. Now black is almost in a Zugzwang position. They can't move their knight and they can't move their king because white's king advances to g5 and white is winning the g6 pawn. The only piece that can make moves is the black's rook. However, we had g5. And this is unfortunately a direct blunder. White simply deflects black's king from the pawn, playing rook h6. After which king e7 is played and then we got f takes g5. White is not only a pawn up, but this g5 pawn is quite close to promotion. There is a plan of advancing to g6 and playing rook h7 with the winning position. Now black plays knight e8 and white goes for king f4. There is no rush. Just slowly improving the king while black's pieces are completely stuck. We got knight e6, pawn to g6, knight to e8, and then g4, which I would say is another beautiful slow move. White is trying to restrict black's knight with the g4, g5 before they start any concrete action. Knight goes to f6, and we got g5. Knight to d7. Now we should simplify and make our king as active as possible. White goes for rook h8. And the point is that black needs to make a move with the knight to b6, for example. White goes for rook h7, and this time the e5 square is available for white's king to enter. Now in case of check on d7, the e6 pawn is hanging, while white is threatening in any case to get the king to f6 and win. We got knight c4 check, after which white played king f6, and black can choose to either take the rook and allow white pawn to promote, or to go to g8, after which white rook switches the side and delivers back rank mate. Therefore, Yifan resigned here. Well, we can see 33 teams mentioned while explaining the game. In order for a beginner to fully understand what is shown, they'd need to know all those mentioned concepts. If some of the concepts are too difficult for our student, only critical positions should be provided, suitable to challenge our students' will to explore further. There is no point of showing the whole game, as it can only make things less logical and cause confusion.